Please be advised, this story delves into themes of psychological distress, intense fear, and medical experimentation, which some listeners may find disturbing. Imagine a fear so primal, so utterly overwhelming, that it strips you of everything familiar. Not a fear of spiders or heights or even death itself. No, this was a fear of nothing. A pure, unadulterated terror that materialized from thin air, seizing people in their everyday lives, leaving them screaming, paralyzed, and utterly broken. This isn't a story about what we fear. It's a story about fear itself, weaponized, unleashed, and meticulously studied. It began subtly, like a whisper beneath the roar of daily life, in the quiet corners of American suburbia. Sarah Miller, a kindergarten teacher in Ohio, was grading papers on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun streamed through her window, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves outside. Everything was normal. Then, without warning, her hands began to tremble. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum solo in her chest. A cold dread, sharp and absolute, clawed its way up her spine. She wasn't afraid of anything, no intruder, no sudden noise, no looming deadline. It was just fear. Raw, unreasoning, all-consuming fear. She dropped her pen, a silent scream building in her throat, her vision tunneling until the only thing left was the white-hot intensity of pure terror. By the time her husband, David, found her minutes later, she was huddled in a fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably, unable to articulate anything beyond a choked, guttural sound of utter despair. A week later, a similar incident unfolded 1,000 miles away in Arizona. Michael Thompson, a seasoned architect, was presenting blueprints to a panel of investors. He was confident, articulate, in his element. Mid-sentence, his voice caught. A wave of ice-cold panic washed over him, drenching him in sweat. The room, moments ago filled with familiar faces, suddenly felt menacing. The air grew thick, suffocating. He couldn't breathe. His knees buckled and he collapsed, gasping, convinced he was dying, even as his mind screamed that there was no threat. Paramedics found no medical explanation for his sudden, violent episode. His heart rate eventually normalized, but the memory, the feeling of that terror, lingered like a phantom limb. These weren't isolated incidents for long. Soon emergency rooms across the nation began seeing a trickle, then a steady stream of patients presenting with acute, unprovoked panic attacks unlike anything doctors had ever encountered. Traditional anxiety medications barely touched it. Patients reported a sense of impending doom, a terror so profound it felt like their very souls were being ripped apart, all without a discernible cause. They were terrified of being terrified. The phenomenon defied diagnosis. Was it a new strain of mass hysteria? A rare neurological disorder manifesting simultaneously in unconnected individuals? The medical community was baffled. Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant but notoriously reclusive neuroscientist, first encountered the fear sickness, as the media had begun to dub it, through a series of anonymous data sets. Eris, whose work at the prestigious Beaumont Institute focused on the neurological underpinnings of anxiety and trauma, initially dismissed the early reports as sensationalized journalism or a peculiar form of collective delusion. He'd seen plenty of fads, plenty of unexplained phenomena that eventually dissolved into mundane explanations. But then his former mentor, Dr. Jessica Chun, called him. Her voice, usually calm and composed, was strained. She had a patient, a young woman named Emily Roberts, who had been admitted after an episode so severe Emily had attempted to claw out her own eyes to escape the terrifying visions that weren't there. Jessica described the scans, brain activity spiking in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, to unprecedented levels, but without any corresponding external stimuli. No threat response, no fight or flight trigger. Just pure, unadulterated fear firing at maximum capacity. Eris, Jessica had said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's like her brain is manufacturing terror from thin air. It's not a reaction, it's a production. That call changed everything. Eris, driven by a blend of professional curiosity and a growing unease, began to pore over the growing mountain of clinical data. He analyzed hundreds of patient files, brain imaging, psychological profiles. What he found was disturbing. The victims spanned every demographic, every socioeconomic status. They had no common diet, no shared travel history, no discernible environmental exposure. Yet, the pattern of their terror, the neurological signature, was chillingly consistent. It wasn't just a panic attack. It was a sustained, agonizing state of existential dread, lasting for hours, sometimes days, leaving its victims emotionally scarred and often catatonic. He spent weeks in his lab, a fortress of blinking monitors and humming machinery, fueled by stale coffee and a growing sense of dread. He ran simulations, cross-referenced genetic markers, even delved into obscure biological warfare theories. Nothing fit. The fear wasn't contagious in a viral sense, yet it was spreading, appearing in new cities, new states with an alarming regularity. It was too precise, too uniform in its manifestation, despite the diverse backgrounds of its victims. This wasn't chaos, it was almost orchestrated. One late night, sifting through a discarded digital archive from an old, defunct government research initiative, a project he'd inherited the server space for years ago, Eris stumbled upon a series of encrypted files. They were labeled Project Chimera. The name alone sent a shiver down his spine. The files detailed theoretical research into neurological repatterning for fear induction. The language was dense, coded, full of euphemisms like affective modulation and stimulus response optimization without external triggers. It was pure, speculative science fiction, dismissed as unethical and impossible by the wider scientific community decades ago. Or so he thought. He spent hours decrypting the documents, his heart pounding with a different kind of fear now. Not the raw terror of his patients, but a cold intellectual dread. The files outlined a theoretical method to induce specific emotional states, particularly fear, directly within the human brain, bypassing sensory input. It spoke of ultra-low frequency sonic pulses, subliminal neurological triggers, and even a concept called psychoacoustic resonance, designed to hijack the brain's natural fear pathways. It was a blueprint for manufacturing terror. Eris dismissed it as a relic, a dark thought experiment from a bygone era of unchecked scientific ambition. But then, a phrase from one of the documents snagged his attention. Dissemination via ambient environmental factors, targeting high-density populations for initial phase trials. Ambient environmental factors. Not a virus, not a chemical, but something unseen, unheard, woven into the very fabric of the air we breathed, the signals we received. He pulled up the geographical data for the reported fear incidents. He overlaid them with maps of cellular tower density, Wi-Fi hotspots, even specific atmospheric conditions. For days he found nothing conclusive, just a sprawling, incomprehensible web of random occurrences. He was about to give up, convinced he was chasing ghosts, when a single, almost imperceptible detail in Jessica's patient's brain scan caught his eye again. A faint, almost artistic ripple in the brain's electrical activity, a signature that wasn't present in any known neurological disorder. It was like a watermark, a fingerprint. And then he remembered something from the Project Chimera files. A specific wave pattern, a theoretically generated resonance frequency, precisely designed to stimulate the amygdala without external sensory input. He ran the pattern against his collected patient data. The match was agonizingly subtle at first, like trying to find a single grain of sand on a vast beach. But as he refined his algorithms, the pattern began to emerge. Faint, consistent, and present in every single patient suffering from the fear sickness. Eris stared at the glowing screen, the complex algorithms confirming his worst fears. This wasn't mass hysteria. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was an engineered terror, a meticulously designed psychological weapon. And the chilling realization that hit him with the force of a physical blow was this: the fear sickness wasn't an outbreak. It was a test. And the entire United States unknowingly was the laboratory. The entire United States unknowingly was the laboratory. The thought didn't just rattle Michael. It ripped through the carefully constructed facade of his scientific world. He wasn't just battling a pathogen. He was a pawn in an unfathomably vast game. He stared at the glowing monitors, the epidemiological maps, the genomic sequences, and suddenly everything looked different. The clusters of panic, the inexplicable surges of terror, the seemingly random geographical spread, they weren't random at all. They were data points in an equation he was only just beginning to decipher. He spent the next 72 hours in a blur, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a growing dread. He re-examined every single piece of data, not for viral markers but for patterns of influence, for anomalies that defied biological explanation. He looked at population density, internet traffic, weather patterns, even seismic activity. Anything that could be correlated with the sudden, localized outbreaks of what the media now simply called the fear. His colleagues saw his intensity, his increasingly disheveled appearance, but attributed it to the relentless pressure of the crisis. They praised his dedication, but Michael knew he was no longer looking for a cure. He was looking for the puppeteers. He found the first real anomaly in the symptom onset data. While some cases showed a gradual escalation of anxiety, a significant subset reported an instantaneous, overwhelming wave of terror, often accompanied by vivid shared hallucinations. People described seeing impossible shadows, hearing whispers that weren't there, feeling an icy dread that wasn't their own. And these extreme, almost identical experiences tended to occur in tightly clustered groups, sometimes within a few city blocks, then vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind a lingering, debilitating psychological trauma. This wasn't how a virus worked. Viruses spread, mutated, adapted. They didn't appear in a hyper-localized burst, trigger identical hallucinations, and then retreat, only to resurface miles away with the same precision. This was orchestrated. Michael knew he couldn't keep this to himself, but he also knew how insane it would sound. He needed someone he trusted, someone brilliant, someone who wouldn't immediately dismiss him as sleep-deprived and paranoid. He thought of Dr. Sarah Chan, a senior virologist at the CDC, renowned for her sharp intellect and her open-minded approach to complex problems. She was skeptical by nature, but her skepticism was rooted in evidence, not dogma. He found her late one night, hunched over a microscope in her lab, eyes narrowed in concentration. "Sarah," he began, his voice raspy from disuse. She looked up, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Michael, you look like you've seen a ghost. Any breakthroughs on the genomic sequencing?" "More than a breakthrough," he said, pulling up a chair and gesturing for her to sit. "A revelation. But you need to hear me out without interruption and keep an open mind." He laid out his theory. The non-viral nature of the symptoms, the erratic, non-biological spread, the identical, almost programmed hallucinations, the lack of a clear vector. He showed her the geographical clusters, overlaid with data points that, to anyone else, would seem unrelated. Unusual spikes in localized microwave radiation readings, odd fluctuations in the geomagnetic field, and bafflingly, a series of seemingly innocuous, newly installed cellular booster towers in each affected region. Sarah listened, her expression unreadable, her brow furrowed deeper with each piece of evidence he presented. When he finished, the silence in the lab was deafening. "Michael," she said finally, her voice soft but firm, "I understand you're under immense stress. We all are. But what you're suggesting, it sounds like science fiction. A psychological weapon? Targeted microwave radiation? This isn't the flu, but it's not a conspiracy theory either." "But what if it is?" Michael pressed, his voice rising with urgency. "What if the reason we can't find a virus is because there isn't one? What if the symptoms are real, the fear is real, but the cause is entirely synthetic? A frequency, a signal, something that directly manipulates brain chemistry." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Even if such a thing were possible, Michael, the scale you're suggesting, affecting an entire nation, the infrastructure, the power, the sheer audacity of it, it's beyond anything conceivable." "Is it?" Michael countered, pulling up another map. "Look at this. Every single major cluster, every instance of these extreme shared hallucinations, correlates with the recent installation of these new 5G plus cellular towers. Not just any towers, but a specific model, manufactured by a company called Viridian Dynamics, a company that barely existed 2 years ago, now somehow cornering the market on next-gen cellular infrastructure. And their contracts are often with small, obscure towns and rural areas, not the densely populated urban centers where you'd expect a cellular upgrade to be prioritized." Sarah leaned closer, her eyes scanning the data. "Viridian Dynamics," she murmured, typing the name into her terminal. "I've never heard of them." A few clicks later, her expression shifted. "Their financials are opaque. A labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts. And their board of directors? A few names I recognize from defense contractor circles, but mostly unknowns." "Exactly," Michael said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "They're not building a better cell network, Sarah. They're building a grid. A grid that, I believe, is designed to broadcast something else entirely. Something that interacts with the human brain." He showed her a declassified paper he'd found buried in an old military database, detailing speculative research from the Cold War era on pulsed electromagnetic fields and their potential for non-lethal crowd control, even mood alteration. The paper had been dismissed as theoretical, too complex, too energy-intensive. But modern technology, Sarah was still skeptical, but a sliver of doubt had clearly taken root. The patterns were too precise, the correlations too specific to be entirely coincidental. The idea was terrifyingly outlandish, but less outlandish than a virus that could cause identical, shared hallucinations and then vanish without a trace. "Okay," she said slowly. "Let's assume for a moment that you're not completely mad. If this fear sickness is a broadcast, what is it broadcasting? And why? What's the end game?" "That's what I don't know," Michael admitted. "But I think the why might be as simple as observation. A test. To see how a population reacts under sustained manufactured terror. How quickly society unravels. How easily people can be controlled." Their investigation became a clandestine operation within the CDC itself. They worked late into the nights cross-referencing data, digging into Viridian dynamics, trying to find a backdoor, a leak, any piece of information that could confirm Michael's theory. They found more anomalies. Unexplained power surges in the vicinity of the Viridian towers, highly encrypted data traffic emanating from them, and most disturbingly, a series of patents filed by Viridian for neuromodulation arrays and frequency-specific cognitive entrainment systems, all cloaked in highly technical, deliberately obscure language. The fear sickness continued to spread, escalating in intensity. In a small town in Ohio, a cluster of people didn't just experience terror. They descended into catatonic states, their eyes wide with unseen horrors. In a quiet suburb of Arizona, an entire neighborhood was gripped by a sudden, inexplicable wave of aggression, leading to violent outbursts and property destruction, before the effect abruptly subsided. These new, more extreme manifestations always occurred near a newly activated Viridian tower. One evening, as Michael and Sarah were poring over satellite images, a new detail emerged. In every location where the fear sickness had reached its most extreme, catatonic or aggressive forms, there wasn't just a Viridian tower. There was also a secondary, smaller structure, usually disguised as a utility shed or a weather station, positioned precisely within a 500-meter radius of the main tower. These structures were too small for a conventional substation, too complex for a simple weather sensor. Sarah zoomed in on one such structure in rural Pennsylvania, where a wave of profound despair had recently swept through the population. "What is that?" she whispered, her finger tracing the outline of a metallic dome barely visible on the roof of the small building. It looked almost like a miniature satellite dish, but pointed downwards, not upwards. Michael felt a cold dread creep up his spine. "It's not receiving," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the image. "It's transmitting. And it's not transmitting to space. It's transmitting down. To the ground. To the people." He pulled up the patent information for Viridian dynamics again, specifically a patent for a localized atmospheric resonance emitter. The language was dense, but the diagram, once he recognized the components, was chillingly clear. It was a device designed to precisely manipulate specific frequencies within a confined atmospheric space, capable of inducing targeted psychological effects. The dome wasn't a dish, it was an emitter. His heart hammered against his ribs. The 5G+ towers were the broad-spectrum delivery system, establishing a wide-area field. But these smaller secondary structures, these resonance emitters, they were the fine-tuning. They were the precision instruments. And they were being deployed in areas where the test required a more intense, more specific psychological response. Sarah looked at him, her face pale. "They're not just observing, Michael," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're actively experimenting, modulating the effects, pushing the boundaries of human fear and despair and aggression. And these emitters, they're the ultimate control." The realization hit them both with the force of a physical blow. The fear sickness wasn't just a test of a psychological weapon. It was a live, real-time, escalating clinical trial. And the entire United States wasn't just the laboratory. It was the unwitting, suffering subject of a monstrous, ongoing experiment in human control. This wasn't some sudden, cataclysmic event. It was a slow, insidious creep, a whisper in the dark that gradually became a shout no one could ignore. The true genesis of Project Chimera, the code name for this unspeakable undertaking, lies not in a single moment, but in a series of decisions made in the hushed, windowless rooms of a facility known only as the Citadel. The Citadel wasn't on any public map. Nestled deep within an undisclosed government reservation, it was officially designated a national security think tank, a hub for advanced psychological warfare defense. Its initial mandate, established in the shadow of a new millennium fraught with global uncertainty, was to understand and predict mass societal reactions to crises, to model the intricate dance of panic, resilience, and fear within a population. It was ostensibly a shield, but like so many powerful tools, its potential for offense was too tempting to ignore. At its core, Project Chimera was the brainchild of Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant, albeit fiercely pragmatic behavioral psychologist. Reed believed that fear, while destructive, was also the ultimate lever of control. She argued that if a nation could understand the precise mechanisms by which collective fear was ignited, sustained, and modulated, it could, in turn, inoculate itself against chaos. Or, more chillingly, it could guide its population through any desired social or political landscape. She wasn't alone. A cabal of high-ranking, deeply nationalistic strategists saw in Reed's theories not just a defense mechanism, but an unprecedented instrument for maintaining domestic stability and projecting global power. They envisioned a future where the American populace, while free in name, could be subtly steered away from dissent, toward compliance, and into a state of perpetual manageable readiness. The first phase, codenamed Alpha, was a massive data collection initiative. This wasn't about individual surveillance, at least not yet. This was about mapping the collective unconscious. Teams of analysts, shrouded in layers of secrecy, began to meticulously scrape every available public data point. News consumption patterns, social trends, early internet forum discussions, public polling data, even the emotional tenor of popular entertainment. They sought to identify the fear genome of the nation, the underlying anxieties, the triggers that resonated most deeply, the fault lines along which society could be fractured or unified. They built algorithms, crude by today's standards but revolutionary for their time, that could predict how a specific narrative, a particular piece of news, or even a nuanced shift in public discourse would propagate and impact the collective mood. They studied the subtle shifts in language, the rise and fall of specific anxieties, the way whispers could become roars. Then came phase beta. This was where the experiment truly began to take root. With a sophisticated understanding of the nation's psychological architecture, the Citadel's teams moved from observation to subtle intervention. They began to test the waters, introducing carefully crafted narratives into the national conversation through proxy channels. Think tanks, niche online publications, even seemingly innocuous public service announcements or entertainment storylines were subtly influenced. Not overt propaganda, but a gentle, almost imperceptible nudge. They experimented with amplifying existing anxieties, polarizing seemingly harmless topics, or introducing novel, low-level threats that had no real basis in reality, just to see how quickly they would spread and how deeply they would embed themselves in the public consciousness. For instance, a seemingly minor news story about a localized environmental hazard in one state might suddenly gain disproportionate national attention, framed in a way that tapped into broader anxieties about health or safety. Or a nuanced debate on economic policy might be subtly reframed to trigger a sense of impending financial doom, even when data suggested otherwise. The goal wasn't to create panic, not yet. It was to measure susceptibility, to see how easily the national emotional thermostat could be adjusted, how quickly a sense of unease could be manufactured and sustained. They were planting seeds of doubt, cultivating a low-grade, ambient paranoia. This was the era when many Americans began to feel an inexplicable shift, a vague, persistent sense of underlying tension. Conversations around dinner tables seemed to grow more contentious, news cycles felt more urgent, even mundane events seemed to carry an undercurrent of threat. People found themselves feeling more stressed, irritable, or generally on edge, often without a clear, specific reason. Friends and family who once shared common ground seemed to drift into opposing camps, fueled by narratives that felt increasingly alienating. It was phase gamma, the environmental sensitization, taking hold. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety became the new normal. The media landscape, consciously or unconsciously influenced, began to reflect and amplify this manufactured unease. Every minor incident became a potential catastrophe, every disagreement a looming crisis. One of the first outsiders to truly sense this shift, though he couldn't put his finger on its true origin, was David Miller. David was a sociology professor at a reputable university in the Midwest, a man who dedicated his life to understanding societal trends and collective psychology. In the early 2000s, he began noticing anomalies in his data. Public sentiment, which usually fluctuated with clear economic or political events, now seemed increasingly decoupled from objective reality. There was a growing generalized anxiety that didn't map to traditional indicators. His students, once optimistic and engaged, seemed more cynical, more prone to emotional outbursts, and strangely more susceptible to alarmist headlines. David meticulously tracked these shifts. He published papers on the Great American Unease, speculating on the sociological factors contributing to what he called a national psychological drift. He noted the increasing polarization of public discourse, the rapid spread of what he termed narrative infections, ideas or anxieties that seemed to jump from one segment of the population to another with unprecedented speed. He saw how minor disagreements could escalate into intense, emotional battles, seemingly out of proportion to their actual importance. He observed how the very fabric of trust, both in institutions and among citizens, seemed to be fraying at an alarming rate. He couldn't explain it. He theorized about the rise of digital media, the fragmentation of communities, the relentless pace of modern life. All valid points, he thought, but none fully accounted for the sheer scale, the uniformity, and the direction of the psychological shift he was witnessing. It was as if an invisible hand was gently, but firmly, turning the dials of national emotion. David knew something was profoundly wrong, something deeper than mere societal evolution. He called it the creeping dread, a pervasive collective anxiety that seemed to have no discernible source, yet permeated every aspect of American life. What David Miller, and indeed the entire nation, failed to grasp was that this creeping dread wasn't an organic phenomenon. It wasn't a natural byproduct of the modern age. It was a meticulously engineered outcome. It was the successful implementation of Project Chimera's initial phases, a subtle yet pervasive conditioning of the American psyche. The Citadel had learned how to play the nation like a finely tuned instrument, and the resulting symphony was one of perpetual disquiet. And this, they believed, was just the beginning. The architects of Chimera weren't content with merely understanding fear. They intended to master it, to wield it, and the next phase of their experiment was about to escalate the stakes beyond anything David Miller, or any American, could possibly imagine. This escalation began not in a sterile lab, but in the heart of bustling cities, in the quiet solitude of suburban homes, and across the vast interconnected network of the modern world. Chimera's researchers had meticulously cataloged every nuance of human terror. They knew what made individual minds crack, what triggered primal flight responses, and what kind of psychological pressure could lead to compliance or chaos. Now they sought to apply this knowledge not to a single subject, but to society itself. Their objective was chillingly simple: to engineer fear on a grand scale, to create a controllable, pervasive atmosphere of unease that could be amplified or suppressed at will. They called it Project Siren, a name that evoked both allure and danger, a song designed to draw unsuspecting minds into its psychological current. Project Siren wasn't about bombs or overt attacks. It was far more insidious, a silent, creeping psychological warfare. It began with whispers, with carefully planted seeds of doubt and anxiety that spread like a virus through the digital bloodstream of the nation. Anonymous forums, encrypted chat groups, and niche social media platforms buzzed with theories of strange occurrences. Inexplicable, low-frequency hums echoing through empty parks at twilight, fleeting, almost subliminal shadows caught on ubiquitous security cameras that vanished upon closer inspection, unsettling glitches in public infrastructure that seemed too precise, too meaningful to be accidental. These weren't isolated incidents. They were meticulously orchestrated, designed to bypass rational thought and tap directly into the subconscious anxieties of the populace. A sudden nationwide surge in reports of sleep paralysis, accompanied by strikingly similar descriptions of a looming silent figure, always just at the periphery of vision, at the foot of beds. Mass sightings of unusual aerial phenomena, dismissed by authorities as misidentifications or hoaxes, yet stubbornly persistent and detailed in online communities. Even subtle manipulations of ambient soundscapes in urban areas, introducing barely perceptible infrasound frequencies known to induce feelings of dread, paranoia, and even mild nausea, without any conscious awareness of their source. The goal was desensitization, then sensitization, then full-blown psychological conditioning. David Miller, a freelance investigative journalist with a knack for spotting patterns where others saw only coincidence, was one of the first to notice. He'd carved out a niche for himself debunking urban legends and government conspiracies, a pragmatic skeptic with a sharp mind for data and a healthy distrust of easy answers. But lately, even his formidable skepticism was being tested. It started innocently enough. A friend, a usually unflappable tech analyst named Sarah Jenkins, called him late one night, her voice trembling with an unnerving mixture of fear and conviction. She swore her smart home devices were talking to each other, not just responding to commands, but having what sounded like hushed, nonsensical conversations when no one was around. David, ever the rationalist, attributed it to a software bug, perhaps a sophisticated prank by a disgruntled neighbor, or even just auditory pareidolia. But Sarah was insistent. She sent him recordings, faint, distorted whispers that were just beyond comprehension, punctuated by what sounded like static and an almost rhythmic, unsettling hum, like a heartbeat from within the walls. Then came the emails. Not just to David, but to several other journalists he knew, all from anonymous sources, all linking seemingly unrelated incidents across different states. A rash of sudden, unexplained power outages in small, geographically disparate towns, always at precisely midnight, always lasting exactly 17 minutes, always accompanied by reports of widespread panic and bizarre, collective hallucinations among residents, visions of flickering figures, disembodied voices, or a profound sense of impending doom. A series of perfectly synchronized glitches in national GPS systems, leading thousands of drivers off course simultaneously, causing widespread confusion, minor accidents, and an unnerving sense of being lost even on familiar roads. Yet, no official explanation was ever offered beyond vague references to system anomalies or atmospheric interference. David couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't just random events. There was a rhythm to them, a subtle, almost artistic precision that hinted at a deeper, more sinister orchestration. He started cross-referencing the incidents, meticulously mapping them out. The exact timing, the specific geographical locations, the particular psychological impact reported by witnesses. He noticed that the patterns aligned with an almost mathematical elegance, like a dark symphony being conducted across the American landscape, its discordant notes designed to create a crescendo of collective anxiety. He spent weeks poring over obscure academic papers on mass hysteria, collective delusions, the overview effect in reverse, where rather than awe one feels profound insignificance and terror, and the psychological impact of subliminal messaging. He learned about the nocebo effect, where negative expectations could induce real physical symptoms, and the insidious power of priming, subtly influencing behavior through exposure to certain stimuli, making individuals more susceptible to suggestion. He began to suspect that someone wasn't just observing these phenomena. They were actively creating them, with a disturbing level of sophistication. His investigation led him down increasingly dark rabbit holes. He discovered a series of defunct, obscure scientific journals from the mid-20th century, mentioning a clandestine research initiative known only by the code name Chimera. The articles, often heavily redacted, spoke of experimental psychology, behavioral modification, and the quantification of human terror. The connection was tenuous, a thread barely visible through the academic jargon and censored passages, but to David, it felt like a cold, metallic taste in his mouth, a premonition of something truly unsettling. He tried to share his nascent findings with his editor, Mark Peterson, a grizzled veteran with a healthy dose of cynicism born from decades in the newsroom. Mark listened patiently, then dismissed it as an elaborate conspiracy theory, the result of too many late nights and too much caffeine. "David," Mark had said, his voice laced with patronizing concern, "you're seeing ghosts where there are only shadows. People freak out, things break down. It's the modern world, kid. Paranoia is just a side effect of constant connectivity." But David couldn't let it go. Sarah Jenkins's calls became more frantic, her initial fear morphing into a raw, desperate terror. She claimed she was being followed, that the whispers in her house were growing louder, forming coherent sentences, always about the harvest and the reaping. Then one morning she vanished. Just gone. No trace. Her apartment empty, her phone disconnected, her car still in the driveway. The police called it a voluntary disappearance, citing stress and suggesting she might have just needed a break, but David knew Sarah. She wouldn't just leave. Not like that. Not without a word. Her disappearance solidified David's conviction. This wasn't just a pattern anymore. It was a direct, personal threat, and it had reached into his own life, claiming someone he cared about. He remembered Sarah's last frantic voicemail, her voice barely a whisper, choked with fear. David, it's not random. They're building something. A wave. They're testing it on us. And I think the target isn't just fear. It's control. Control. The word echoed in David's mind, a chilling revelation. If Chimera could engineer fear on a societal level, what was their ultimate goal? What kind of unimaginable power would that grant them? He envisioned a world where public opinion could be swayed by an invisible hand, where populations could be pacified or incited at will, all through the subtle manipulation of their deepest anxieties. A world where freedom of thought was an illusion, where every decision, every emotion was a carefully programmed response. He realized then that Chimera wasn't just interested in understanding fear, or even wielding it. They were building a mechanism for psychological dominion, a weapon capable of rewriting the collective consciousness. And the strange incidents, the whispers, the glitches, the mass hallucinations, these were just reconnaissance, elaborate field tests. They were testing the limits, calibrating their instruments, refining their techniques on an unsuspecting populace, preparing for something far greater. The stakes had escalated from abstract scientific curiosity to a terrifying real-world threat that touched every American. David Miller, a lone journalist with a laptop, a rapidly dwindling sense of security, and a growing sense of dread, suddenly found himself confronting an unseen enemy that could manipulate the very fabric of reality, or at least humanity's perception of it. He was no longer just an observer. He was a potential target, and perhaps the only one connecting the dots before the entire canvas was consumed by shadows. He had to find Sarah. He had to expose Chimera. But how do you fight an enemy that controls the very air you breathe, the information you consume, and the fear that lurks in the deepest corners of your mind? The experiment in human fear had truly begun, and the world was now its unwitting laboratory. The experiment in human fear had truly begun, and the world was now its unwitting laboratory. The initial tremors were subtle, almost imperceptible, a slight shift in the collective mood, like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm. People found themselves more irritable, more suspicious, prone to anxieties they couldn't quite name. The news cycles, once a cacophony of diverse stories, began to coalesce around narratives of impending doom, of unseen enemies, of threats lurking just beyond the horizon. It wasn't overt propaganda, not yet. It was a gradual, insidious redirection of attention, a gentle nudge towards the precipice of paranoia. Jessica Riley, a veteran investigative journalist with a nose for truth and an allergy to sensationalism, was one of the first to feel the chill. Her beat usually involved uncovering corruption in city contracts or exposing corporate malfeasance. But lately, her editors, usually champions of hard-hitting facts, seemed to have developed an insatiable appetite for anything that could generate outrage or fear. A local dispute over zoning became a threat to community safety. A minor economic downturn was framed as the collapse of the American dream. Jessica found her carefully researched articles, rich in nuance and context, being pushed aside for clickbait headlines that screamed of crisis. She sat at her desk late one Tuesday night, the glow of her monitor illuminating the frustration etched on her face. Her latest piece, a deep dive into sustainable urban planning, had been relegated to an obscure corner of the website, while an article about a spike in petty crime, presented with ominous language and speculative fear-mongering, was plastered across the homepage. The comments section beneath the crime piece was a cesspool of fear and anger, each remark amplifying the next, creating a self-sustaining echo chamber of dread. This wasn't journalism, it was psychological warfare. "Something's off, David," she muttered into her phone later that night, pacing her small apartment. Her friend David Chan, a data analyst who had a knack for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, listened patiently. It's like the entire internet decided to collectively lose its mind. Every algorithm, every feed, every trending topic. It's all designed to make people afraid, angry, or both. David's voice, usually calm and methodical, had a new edge to it. "You're not wrong, Jess. I've been seeing it too. My work involves tracking social sentiment, and the graphs are going haywire. It's like a coordinated attack on public consciousness. The baseline level of anxiety has quadrupled in the last 2 months alone. And it's not tied to any single event. It's a constant low-frequency hum of dread." "Exactly," Jessica exclaimed. "And it's not just the news. My friends, my family. They're all talking about it. They're more stressed, more quick to believe outlandish theories, more isolated. My sister Emily, usually the most grounded person I know, Just spent an hour telling me how she's convinced the government is tracking her through her smart home devices. And she believes it, David, with absolute conviction. David sighed. The data suggests a systemic manipulation. I've been looking at content amplification trends. There are certain keywords, certain emotional triggers that are being boosted exponentially across platforms. Not just by human users, but by bots, by AI, by something far more sophisticated than your average troll farm. It's like an invisible hand is guiding the narrative, pushing specific emotional buttons. But who? Jessica pressed, her journalist instincts kicking in. Who benefits from a world gripped by fear? And how are they doing it so effectively? That's the million-dollar question, David replied. I've tried tracing the origins of some of these amplification networks. They're incredibly complex, designed to obscure their tracks. It's not just one source. It's a decentralized tapestry of fear, woven with such precision that it appears organic. But it isn't. The statistical anomalies are screaming at me. He paused, and Jessica could hear the frantic clicking of his keyboard in the background. Hold on, Jess. I found something. It's tiny, almost imperceptible, hidden deep within the metadata of some of the most viral, fear-inducing content. A digital signature, a string of code that's identical across disparate platforms, across different types of media. It's like a watermark, but only visible if you know exactly what you're looking for. A watermark? Jessica felt a jolt of adrenaline. What does it mean? It means it's not random. It means it's one source, or at least one highly coordinated group, embedding their mark. I'm trying to decrypt it, but it's heavily obfuscated. It looks like some kind of proprietary encryption, something I've never seen before. The conversation with David only fueled Jessica's resolve. The next day, she started digging deeper, not into specific stories, but into the structure of information itself. She observed how public discourse was being subtly polarized. Every issue became a binary choice. Us versus them, good versus evil. Nuance was eradicated, replaced by inflammatory rhetoric and moral outrage. People were losing the ability to empathize, to understand opposing viewpoints. The common ground was eroding, leaving only trenches of division. She saw it in the grocery store checkout line, where two strangers erupted into a heated argument over a minor political statement on a magazine cover. She saw it in online forums, where civil discussions devolved into personal attacks and threats within minutes. She saw it in her own newsroom, where colleagues, once united by a shared purpose, now eyed each other with suspicion, each convinced the other was falling prey to the other side's propaganda. The fear wasn't just external, it was internalizing. Jessica felt her own anxiety levels rising. She found herself double-checking locks, scrutinizing strangers, and questioning every piece of information she consumed. The constant barrage of negativity, the subtle whispers of impending disaster, began to wear her down. It was a psychological siege, and the walls of her own mind were starting to crumble. One evening, while researching the history of psychological warfare, she stumbled upon a forgotten academic paper from the late 20th century, titled The Architecture of Fear, Designing Societal Collapse. The paper, dismissed as fringe theory at the time, detailed how a society could be destabilized not by direct force, but by the systematic erosion of trust, the amplification of tribalism, and the sustained induction of low-grade, pervasive anxiety. It described a hypothetical fear contagion that could spread through information networks, turning citizens against each other and making them desperate for any authority that promised order, even at the cost of freedom. The chilling parallels to her current reality sent a shiver down her spine. The paper spoke of fear as a weapon, of cognitive infiltration, and of engineered despair. It outlined methods for creating artificial crises, for manipulating public perception of risk, and for fostering a state of perpetual vigilance that would exhaust the populace. Jessica realized this wasn't just about clicks or ratings. This was about control. This was about engineering a new reality, one built on a foundation of manufactured fear. The digital watermark David found, the subtle shifts in algorithms, the coordinated amplification of divisive content, it all pointed to a deliberate, methodical plan. She called David again, her voice tight with a newfound urgency. David, I think I know what this is. It's not just manipulation. It's an architecture. A system designed to make us afraid, to make us turn on each other, to make us desperate for someone to step in and fix it all. I think you're right, Jess, David said, his voice grim. I've managed to peel back a few more layers of that digital signature. It's incredibly sophisticated. It's not just code. It's a signature that implies a massive, global infrastructure. An organization, perhaps even a government-level entity, but operating entirely in the shadows. And the more I dig, the more I realize just how deeply embedded this experiment is. It's in our news feeds, our entertainment, even our public health advisories. It's everywhere. Jessica looked out her window at the city lights, once a comforting tapestry, now seeming like a million isolated pockets of fear. The world was indeed a laboratory, and humanity the unwitting test subjects. The experiment was accelerating, and the results were terrifyingly clear. A society fracturing under the weight of its own manufactured anxieties, ripe for a solution, any solution, no matter the cost. But who was running this experiment and what was their ultimate goal? The answers lay hidden in plain sight, obscured by the very fear they had so meticulously cultivated. The answers lay hidden in plain sight, obscured by the very fear they had so meticulously cultivated. It was a truth that resonated with chilling clarity in the mind of Michael Chun, a data journalist whose career was built on sifting through the digital detritus of human behavior. For months, Michael had been noticing anomalies, not just a gradual uptick in anxiety, which could be easily explained by global events or economic shifts, but a sudden, almost synchronized surge in specific fear-related keywords across social media, search engines, and even obscure forum discussions. It was like a wave, not rising organically, but crashing down with engineered precision. Initially, he dismissed it. The internet was a cesspool of collective neuroses, after all. But the patterns persisted, sharpening, becoming too distinct to ignore. He saw spikes in searches for insomnia remedies, immediately followed by stress management apps. A surge in financial insecurity discussions would be quickly met with ads for wealth protection seminars. It wasn't just correlation. It was a deliberate cause and effect, an alarm bell ringing in the digital ether. Michael, fueled by a journalist's insatiable curiosity and a growing sense of unease, began to pull at the threads. His investigation led him down a rabbit hole of shell corporations, obscure ad agencies, and seemingly disconnected wellness brands. But one name kept surfacing with unnerving regularity: Ethel Solutions. On the surface, Ethel Solutions was a beacon of modern wellness. Their website boasted sleek designs, smiling, serene faces, and testimonials praising their holistic approach to mental well-being. They offered everything from mindfulness retreats to biofeedback devices, stress-reducing supplements, and a popular harmony app that promised to guide users to inner peace. Their public image was impeccable, their mission statement noble. But Michael's data told a different story. He discovered that Ethel Solutions, through a labyrinthine network of subsidiaries and strategic partnerships, was directly funding or subtly influencing a startling number of the very platforms and content creators that were generating the fear-based narratives he'd been tracking. They weren't just responding to public anxiety, they were seeding it. They were sponsoring studies that exaggerated everyday risks, publishing articles that amplified minor inconveniences into looming threats, and even subtly adjusting algorithms to push fear-inducing content into people's feeds. It was a brilliant, horrifying strategy. First, create the problem. Whisper doubts into the collective subconscious. Stoke anxieties about health, finances, relationships, the very fabric of society. Make people feel increasingly vulnerable, isolated, and overwhelmed. Then, when the fear reached a critical mass, when the demand for relief was palpable, step in with the solution. Ethel Solutions wasn't just selling products. They were selling salvation from the very demons they had conjured. Michael started with their Harmony app. It promised personalized meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy modules. But buried deep in the terms of service, which virtually no one read, were clauses granting Ethel Solutions extensive data collection rights. Not just usage data, but access to microphone inputs, camera permissions, and even biometric data if a paired device was used. Michael realized with a jolt that the app wasn't just listening to users, it was learning them. It was mapping their anxieties, their triggers, their deepest fears, not to soothe them, but to refine the very techniques used to manipulate them. He found a former employee, a software engineer named David Miller, who had worked on the Harmony app. David was reluctant to speak, clearly terrified, but Michael's persistence eventually wore him down. They met in a nondescript coffee shop, David constantly glancing over his shoulder. "It started out innocent enough," David whispered, his voice hoarse. We were building an AI for personalized therapy. Revolutionary stuff. But then the directives changed. We were told to prioritize engagement metrics over clinical efficacy. Engagement meant keeping users on the app, making them feel like they needed it. And the best way to do that was to make sure their anxiety never truly went away. Just enough relief to keep them coming back, but never full peace. David described how the AI, instead of genuinely helping users overcome their fears, would subtly reinforce them. If a user expressed anxiety about their job, the app might recommend articles about economic downturns or feature guided meditations that, rather than alleviating the fear, would guide them to examine the fear, keeping it at the forefront of their minds. Then it would gently nudge them towards other Ethel products, a career resilience workshop, a financial stability supplement. It was a perpetual feedback loop designed to cultivate dependence. They were building profiles, David continued, his eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and terror. Detailed psychological profiles of millions of people, their anxieties, their hopes, their breaking points. It wasn't about wellness, Michael. It was about control, about understanding how to push the right buttons to get people to buy, to believe, to conform. Michael felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This wasn't just a scam. It was an insidious form of psychological warfare waged on an unsuspecting populace. He asked David about the upper echelons of Ethel Solutions, who was truly behind it. David hesitated, his gaze darting around the cafe. "There's Dr. Evelyn Reed," he finally said, barely audible. "She's the public face of their research division, a brilliant neuroscientist. She gives all the keynote speeches, talks about the future of human potential. But she's just a puppet. The real power, it's a board of directors. Anonymous, shadowy. I only ever heard whispers of a Chairman Thorne. Never saw him, never even saw a picture. Just a name that struck fear into everyone." David gave Michael an encrypted hard drive, a small, unassuming black rectangle. "This is everything I could salvage before I left," he said, pushing it across the table. "Research data, internal memos, financial records, some of the original AI code. It's incomplete, but it's enough to prove what they're doing. Just be careful, Michael. They don't like people digging too deep." As Michael left the coffee shop, the weight of the hard drive felt immense in his pocket. He had found his smoking gun, the definitive link between the manufactured fear and its architects. Ethel Solutions wasn't merely profiting from anxiety. They were orchestrating it, manipulating millions into a state of perpetual unease, only to offer them a gilded cage of false solutions. The implications were staggering. If they could control fear, what else could they control? Public opinion? Political outcomes? The very course of human civilization? He locked himself in his apartment, the blinds drawn, his laptop open. The hard drive hummed as he plugged it in, its contents a Pandora's box of corporate malfeasance and psychological manipulation. He started sifting through the files, his fingers flying across the keyboard, a sense of urgency propelling him forward. The data confirmed David's story, and then some. There were detailed market research reports on anxiety amplification vectors, psychological profiles categorized by susceptibility to fear-based messaging, and projections for optimal fear saturation points in specific demographics. It was all there, laid bare. A meticulously crafted plan to weaponize human vulnerability. But as he delved deeper, a sudden flicker on his screen caught his eye. A small, almost imperceptible icon in the corner of his operating system, a tiny, unfamiliar symbol he didn't recognize. His heart hammered. He immediately ran a diagnostic, his journalistic instincts screaming, "Nothing." The icon vanished. He dismissed it as a glitch, but the prickle of unease remained. He returned to the files, determined to expose Ethel Solutions. He found an internal memo, dated just 3 months prior, discussing Phase 2 implementation. This phase involved not just amplifying general anxiety, but targeting specific, emerging societal anxieties and offering Ethel's advanced solutions as the only viable path forward. The memo hinted at a new product line, something far more invasive than the Harmony app, designed to integrate directly with users' neurobiology. A chilling phrase leaped out at him, preparing the populace for acceptance of the neuroadaptive interface. Michael froze. Neuroadaptive interface? What did that even mean? Before he could process the implications, his laptop screen went black. Not a power outage, not a crash. Just a sudden absolute darkness. Then a single line of text appeared, glowing an eerie red against the void. "We know you're digging, Michael, and we don't appreciate it." The message vanished as swiftly as it appeared, leaving Michael in the terrifying silence of his darkened apartment, the hard drive's faint hum the only evidence of the nightmare he had just uncovered. He was no longer just a journalist uncovering a story. He was a target, and the game had just become deadly serious. Michael didn't move for a long time, the cold dread seeping into his bones. His apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage with invisible bars. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every creak of the old building sounded like footsteps approaching. He wasn't just investigating a story anymore. He was inside it, an unwitting participant in a game he hadn't asked to join. The hard drive, still humming faintly on his desk, was a ticking time bomb, both his greatest weapon and his biggest liability. His first instinct was to run, to disappear, but where would he go? This wasn't a local street gang. This was an organization with resources deep enough to manipulate human minds and erase lives without a trace. Running would only make him an easier target, isolated and without his most crucial asset, the data. Michael forced himself to breathe, to think. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. He needed to secure the information, then himself. He had a few encrypted cloud storage accounts, but uploading this much sensitive data, especially from a compromised source, felt like waving a red flag. He decided on a more analog approach for now. He pulled out a stack of blank USB drives, creating multiple backups, each encrypted with robust, unique passwords. He hid them in various obscure locations around his apartment, inside hollowed-out books, taped beneath loose floorboards, even sealed in a waterproof bag and tucked into the cistern of his toilet. If they came for him, they wouldn't find everything in one place. As he worked, his mind raced, replaying the fragments he'd seen. The distorted faces, the whispers, the chilling calm of the observers. He remembered the unsettling feeling of being watched, the subtle shifts in his own perception after diving into the rabbit hole. Had they been watching him even before he found the hard drive? Had his curiosity, his relentless pursuit of the truth, been anticipated? Was he, in a perverse way, another subject in their grand experiment, his fear and determination meticulously monitored? The thought made his stomach clench. He glanced at his phone, the contact list a blur of names. Jessica. His editor, Daniel. He wanted to call, to scream, to tell someone, anyone, what he had found. But the words caught in his throat. How could he explain this without sounding like a raving lunatic? More importantly, how could he tell them without putting them in unimaginable danger? If this organization could make people disappear, could erase memories, what could they do to someone who merely knew? He was alone in this. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. With the backup secured, Michael turned back to the original hard drive. He needed to go deeper, to understand the mechanism of their control, the identities of the observers, and most importantly, their ultimate goal. He started with the older files, the ones that seemed to predate the more recent case studies. These were less organized, more like raw research notes, fragmented observations, and theoretical frameworks. He found diagrams of neural pathways, psychological profiles detailing susceptibility to suggestion, and detailed flowcharts outlining stages of fear induction. It wasn't about physical torture. It was about psychological manipulation so profound it could rewrite a person's reality. They targeted individuals already experiencing stress or trauma, making them more vulnerable. It was a parasitic process, feeding on existing pain, amplifying it, and then twisting it into something new. One document, heavily redacted but still chilling, outlined a concept they called echo chambers of the mind. It described how carefully curated stimuli, specific frequencies of sound, subliminal images, even certain scent combinations, could create a self-reinforcing loop of fear and paranoia within a subject's own consciousness. The subject would then believe their fears were entirely self-generated, their paranoia a natural response to their environment, never suspecting external influence. The observers merely nudged the dominoes, then watched the cascade. He saw names too, but not of the victims. These were code names, presumably of the observers themselves. Spectre, Shadow, Oracle, and one name that appeared with unsettling frequency, often alongside the most complex and disturbing experiments, Maestro. Maestro seemed to be the architect, the mastermind behind the entire operation, the one who orchestrated the symphony of fear. As Michael delved deeper, a strange pattern began to emerge in the geographical data. While the victims were spread across the United States, there were clusters, small pockets where the experiments seemed to be more concentrated. These weren't major cities, but rather quiet, often overlooked suburban towns, places where people lived seemingly ordinary lives. And in the center of many of these clusters, he found mentions of abandoned industrial sites, old research facilities, or disused government buildings. They were perfect, unassuming fronts for clandestine operations. One location kept reappearing, particularly in association with Maestro and the echo chambers research. An old, defunct textile mill in a sleepy town called Oak Haven, nestled in the Appalachian foothills of North Carolina. The files indicated it had been acquired by a shell corporation years ago, ostensibly for redevelopment that never materialized. But the internal documents hinted at extensive renovations, not for manufacturing, but for containment and observation. A sudden sharp rap on his apartment door made Michael jump, nearly sending his laptop crashing to the floor. His heart hammered against his ribs. He froze, straining his ears. Silence. He must have imagined it. He waited motionless for another minute, then two. Nothing. Just the oppressive quiet of his apartment. He tried to tell himself it was just his nerves, the creeping paranoia from the hard drive's contents getting to him. But a cold knot of fear tightened in his gut. He slowly, cautiously moved towards the door, peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty, dimly lit, the old wallpaper peeling slightly. No one. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no messages. He felt a profound sense of unease, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, as if eyes were still on him, even across an empty hallway. Returning to his desk, he found a new email notification on his screen. It was from an unknown sender. The subject line was simply, "Watcher." He stared at it, his breath catching. He hadn't opened any suspicious links, hadn't broadcast his findings. How could they know? He clicked, his finger trembling. The email contained no text, no images, no attachments. Just a single short audio file. He hesitated, his mind screaming at him not to play it. But his journalistic instinct, his desperate need to understand the enemy, overrode his fear. He clicked play. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled his headphones, growing slowly, steadily. It wasn't a voice, not music, not even white noise. It was a frequency, a specific tone that seemed to vibrate not just in his ears, but in the very air around him, a subtle, invasive sound that began to prickle at the edges of his consciousness. It was the sound of them, the sound of the echo chambers at work. Then, superimposed over the hum, came a whisper, faint, distorted, barely audible, yet undeniably there. It was a single word, repeated over and over, burrowing into his mind like a parasitic insect. Oak Haven. Looking. Oak Haven. The whisper faded, replaced by the relentless hum, then silence. Michael tore off his headphones, his hands shaking. They knew he had the data. They knew he was digging. And they were sending him a message. Not a threat of violence, but a psychological assault, a demonstration of their power, a chilling reminder that they could reach him, even in the perceived safety of his own home. Oak Haven. The name echoed in his mind, no longer just a location on a digital map, but a destination, a challenge. It was a trap he knew, a spider's web laid out for him, but it was also the only lead he had, the only tangible thread connecting him to the elusive Maestro, and the heart of this horrifying experiment. He was being drawn in, pulled deeper into their twisted game. He was no longer just a journalist uncovering a story. He was a target, and now he was a player, forced to confront the architects of fear on their own ground. David felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a feeling far more profound than any fear he'd experienced before. It wasn't just the fear of danger. It was the chilling realization he was no longer an observer in this macabre theater, but a reluctant actor, a puppet in a play he hadn't auditioned for. The ground had shifted beneath him. Every shadow seemed to hold a pair of eyes, every distant siren a warning meant specifically for him. He was raw, exposed, and utterly alone in a game whose rules he barely understood. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, a suffocating wave that tasted of metallic fear. He fought it down, forcing his mind to clarity. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. If they wanted him to play, he would play. But he would play on his own terms, or at least he would try. His journalistic instincts, honed by years of chasing dangerous truths, surged to the forefront, mixed with a primal, desperate need to survive. He had to understand why they had drawn him in, what their ultimate goal was. And more importantly, he had to expose them. He spent the next few hours in a heightened state of alert, dissecting every interaction, every message, every seemingly random event. The cryptic email, the strange phone call, the subtle signs he brushed off as paranoia. They all coalesced into a terrifying pattern. They had been watching him, guiding him, grooming him for this very moment. The sheer audacity of it, the calculated precision, was almost admirable in its depravity. Then the next move came, not with a bang but with a whisper. An anonymous text message, from a burner number he couldn't trace, flashed across his phone screen. It was just a single word, Orion, followed by a string of coordinates. No threat, no instruction, just a destination. It was an invitation or perhaps a summons. David knew it was a trap, a lure, a calculated risk. But he also knew he had no choice. To ignore it was to admit defeat, to allow them to control the narrative entirely. To follow it was to step further into the lion's den. He chose the lion's den. He packed a small bag, making sure his recording device and a burner phone were tucked away securely. He left a coded message for his editor, Jessica, a contingency in case he didn't return. It was vague enough not to raise immediate alarms but specific enough for her to know something was wrong if he vanished. The coordinates led him deep into the industrial outskirts of the city, a labyrinth of abandoned warehouses and forgotten factories. The air grew colder here, heavy with the scent of rust and decay. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows that danced with his unease. He parked his car several blocks away, choosing to approach on foot, moving stealthily between the rusted hulks of buildings, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The coordinates pinpointed an old, dilapidated factory, its windows boarded up, its brick walls crumbling. A faded sign above the main entrance, barely legible, read, Orion Manufacturing. David pushed open a creaking service door, revealing an interior swallowed by darkness. The air inside was thick with dust and the metallic tang of disuse. He pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to cut through the gloom. The beam revealed cavernous spaces, littered with discarded machinery, cobwebs like ghostly draperies, and the unsettling stillness of a place long abandoned. He moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing unnaturally in the vast emptiness. He called out, his voice sounding small and vulnerable, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Only the silence answered, punctuated by the drip of water somewhere in the distance. He felt a chilling certainty that he was not alone. The air was charged with a peculiar tension, a sense of anticipation. As he ventured deeper, he noticed subtle changes. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated through the floor. The dust on certain surfaces seemed disturbed, as if someone had recently walked through. He found a single solitary chair placed in the center of a cleared space, directly beneath a skylight that offered a sliver of the darkening sky. On the chair sat a small unmarked package. David approached it with extreme caution, his senses screaming danger. He circled the chair, scanning the shadows, listening for any telltale sound. There was nothing. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly, and picked up the package. It was light, wrapped in plain brown paper. He tore it open. Inside was an old leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, and a single pristine white card. The card had only a name printed on it, Dr. Evelyn Reed. David's blood ran cold. Evelyn Reed, the name of the lead researcher on the original Project Chimera, experiments he had uncovered in his initial investigation. The woman who had vanished without a trace, presumed dead or in hiding. He opened the journal. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and immediately recognizable from the few archived documents he'd seen. It was Evelyn Reed's journal. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the dense script. It wasn't a scientific log, not entirely. It was a personal account, a confession. The journal revealed a devastating truth. Dr. Reed hadn't just been a researcher. She had been a reluctant architect of the experiment's darker turn. Her initial work was on understanding fear, its neurological pathways, its evolutionary purpose. But her findings had been twisted, corrupted by a shadowy benefactor she only referred to as the collective. They saw fear not as something to understand but as a tool to control. They wanted to weaponize it, to sculpt society through carefully orchestrated psychological manipulation, to create a populace that could be guided by their deepest anxieties. The journal documented her growing horror as the experiments escalated, moving from controlled environments to subtle, insidious infiltrations into public life. She wrote of ripple effects, of planting seeds of fear in communities, observing their growth, and learning how to amplify them. She spoke of Phase 2, a grander design to influence public opinion, political discourse, and even global events by tapping into collective anxieties. David read with a growing sense of dread. The Orion Project wasn't just about individual fear. It was about systemic fear. It was about engineering panic, division, and subservience on a scale he hadn't even conceived. The journal hinted at a vast network, a global reach, and a chillingly patient methodology. Then he found a page dog-eared and marked with a frantic underline. They are perfecting the catalyst. Not just a trigger for fear, but a person who can amplify it, spread it, become a living conduit for the collective unconscious. Someone whose own fear is so pure, so potent, it resonates with others. A perfect subject, a perfect weapon. David's mind reeled. A catalyst, a living conduit. Was that what they were trying to make him? Or was he meant to expose the truth, to become a catalyst for a different kind of ripple effect? One of awareness and resistance? As he absorbed this horrifying revelation, a cold voice cut through the silence, echoing from the far reaches of the factory. Welcome, David. You've proven yourself resilient. A rare quality indeed. David spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. A figure emerged from the deeper shadows, tall and lean, their features obscured by the gloom, but their presence radiating an unnerving calm. The journal, the voice continued, smooth and cultured, is a partial truth. Dr. Reed had her own agenda, her own fears, but it serves its purpose. It brings us to this moment. The game, as you so aptly called it, is about to enter its final phase. David gripped the journal tighter, his journalistic resolve hardening into defiance. Who are you? He demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. What do you want with me? The figure stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, until the faint light from the skylight caught their face. It was a woman, perhaps in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a smile that held no warmth. Her name, David somehow knew, was not in the journal. She was the current architect. We want to understand fear, David, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Not just its mechanics, but its power. And you, Mr. Miller, are proving to be a most fascinating subject. Your fear, your courage, your relentless pursuit of truth, they are all variables in our equation. And now the true experiment begins. You are not just a player, David. You are the final piece. As she spoke, David noticed a subtle shift in the shadows behind her. More figures were emerging, indistinct but numerous. He was surrounded. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen presences. He was trapped, cornered, but the journal in his hand felt like a weapon. He had a face now, a name, and a terrifying glimpse into their ultimate goal. But he also knew with a chilling certainty that he was utterly alone, and the game had just turned deadly. He was trapped, cornered, but the journal in his hand felt like a weapon. He had a face now, a name, and a terrifying glimpse into their ultimate goal. But he also knew with a chilling certainty that he was utterly alone, and the game had just turned deadly. The air in the abandoned facility grew thick with a new kind of dread. Every creak of the old structure, every distant hum of the city, became a potential harbinger of discovery. Michael didn't dare move, pressing himself against the cold, damp concrete, the leather-bound journal clutched tight. He could almost feel eyes on him, a phantom touch on his neck. They knew he was here. They knew he had the journal. He had to get out. Moving with the stealth of a cornered animal, Michael began to retrace his steps, not daring to use his phone's flashlight. The moonlight filtering through grime-streaked windows offered only fractured guidance, painting distorted shadows that danced like specters. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors, each turn a gamble, each door a potential trap. The silence was punctuated by his own ragged breathing, a drumbeat of terror in his ears. He imagined the cold, calculating gaze of Dr. Elias Thorne, now a real person, not just a name in a file, watching him, anticipating his every move. He came to the main entrance, the one he'd pried open hours ago. It stood ajar, a sliver of the outside world beckoning. But as he approached, a faint rhythmic thump-thump echoed from the unseen depths of the building. It sounded like heavy boots on concrete, growing louder, closer. They weren't just watching, they were actively hunting. Panic flared, a cold wave washing over him. He couldn't go through the main entrance. He spun around, his mind racing, searching for another way out. A service tunnel? A loading dock? He remembered a smaller, less obvious exit near the rear of the building, used for waste disposal. It was a long shot, probably locked, but it was his only chance. He sprinted, the sound of the approaching footsteps spurring him on. The journal slapped against his thigh with each stride. He dodged rusted machinery, leaped over debris, his heart hammering against his ribs. The air grew colder as he neared the back of the facility. He found it, a heavy steel door, unmarked, almost invisible against the grimy wall. It was secured, but not with a modern lock. A rusty bolt, large and thick, held it shut. With a groan of effort, Michael threw his weight against it, pulling and twisting. The old metal shrieked in protest, but the bolt held. The footsteps were practically on top of him now. He could hear voices, low and urgent, just around the corner. Desperation lent him unnatural strength. He kicked the door, then slammed his shoulder into the bolt, again and again. Finally, with a deafening screech of metal, the bolt gave way, snapping clean off. He burst out into the night, gasping for air, not daring to look back. He was in a desolate alleyway, lined with overflowing dumpsters and overgrown weeds. He scrambled over a low fence, tearing his jeans, and didn't stop running until the oppressive shadow of the facility was far behind him. He didn't go home. Home wasn't safe. He found refuge in a forgotten corner of a public park, beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree, partially hidden from the streetlights. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his mind was alight with a furious energy. He pulled out the journal, its worn cover a stark contrast to the terrifying truths it contained. He had only skimmed it before, but now, under the pale glow of his phone screen, he delved deeper into the twisted brilliance of Dr. Elias Thorne. The entries weren't just clinical observations. They were a descent into madness, a chilling testament to a mind utterly devoid of empathy. Thorne detailed the early stages of Project Chimera, as he called it. His initial experiments focused on isolating specific fear responses, using chemical triggers and sensory deprivation. But it quickly escalated. He moved from rats to primates, then to human subjects, volunteers, procured through shadowy channels, people who simply disappeared from society. He documented their psychological decline with dispassionate precision, noting how long it took for their identities to fracture, for their minds to break under the relentless assault of manufactured terror. One entry, dated almost 30 years ago, sent a shiver down Michael's spine. Subject 7, a young woman named Sarah Miller, showed remarkable resilience. Her core identity proved resistant to even the most potent fear stimuli. A flaw in methodology, or a unique genetic predisposition? Must investigate further. The goal is not just to elicit fear, but to reprogram the fear response, to make fear itself a controllable, manipulable tool. Michael's blood ran cold. Reprogramming fear. This wasn't just about understanding it, it was about weaponizing it. Thorne wasn't just observing, he was engineering. He wrote about the fear matrix, a theoretical framework where specific phobias could be implanted or amplified, where courage could be systematically eroded, and where entire populations could be subtly manipulated through targeted fear campaigns. Another entry, more recent, spoke of Phase 3 dissemination. Thorne described how the insights gained from Project Chimera could be applied on a macro scale. He hinted at a vast network, influencing media, public policy, and even technological development. The digital age, he wrote, presents unparalleled opportunities for the subtle cultivation of fear. Information, carefully curated and disseminated, can be more potent than any chemical agent. This was it. This was their ultimate goal. Not just to understand fear, but to control it, to use it as a silent, invisible leash on society. And the organization backing Thorne wasn't just a rogue group of scientists. It was a powerful entity pulling strings in the shadows, shaping the world through the very emotion Michael had been trying to understand. He read on, his eyes burning, until he found a section labeled Operational Log Current. It detailed ongoing projects, including a specific reference to the suburban fear amplification study Michael had stumbled upon. Thorne mentioned Michael's own neighborhood, detailing the precise psychological profiles of its residents, the vulnerabilities they possessed. He even mentioned Michael's friend, Jessica, noting her anxiety about financial instability as a potential leverage point. A wave of nausea washed over Michael. They knew Jessica. They knew him. They weren't just observing. They were actively manipulating his life, his friends, his entire community. The journal wasn't just a record of their experiments. It was a blueprint for a terrifying future already in motion. He knew he couldn't hold on to this information alone. He had to expose them. He needed help. His mind immediately went to Officer Davis. Davis had seemed genuinely concerned, genuinely willing to listen. Michael pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed Davis's number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. "Hey, Officer Davis, it's Michael. I found something huge, bigger than I ever imagined. I have proof. It's about Project Chimera, about everything. I can't talk over the phone. Call me back, please. Soon as you can. I'm not at home. I'll explain everything." He hung up, his heart pounding, a sliver of hope piercing through the dread. He tried again, calling his sister, Emily, but her phone went straight to voicemail too. He felt a desperate urge to reach out, to share the crushing weight of what he knew. But the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. He was truly alone. As the first hint of dawn painted the sky, Michael knew he couldn't stay in the park. He needed to be somewhere less exposed, somewhere he could think, strategize. He needed to find Davis. He started walking, keeping to the shadows, his eyes scanning every car, every pedestrian. The world, once familiar, now felt like a stage for Thorne's twisted play. Every person he passed, every news headline he glimpsed on a public screen, suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. Was this all part of their dissemination? Was the fear he saw in people's eyes, the anxiety in their voices, a consequence of Thorne's experiments? He walked for what felt like hours, the journal still clutched tightly in his hand, a lifeline to a terrifying truth. He was nearing the outskirts of town, heading towards a small, run-down motel he remembered from years ago, a place where no one would look for him. As he turned onto a desolate street, a black sedan, sleek and utterly out of place, slowly pulled away from the curb directly in front of him. It had been parked idling, its windows tinted. Michael froze. The car didn't speed off. It simply began to follow him, maintaining a steady, unnerving distance. He couldn't see the driver, but he felt their presence, a cold, predatory gaze. They knew where he was. They had found him. The game wasn't just deadly. It was already closing in. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the night. The SUV, a dark, hulking shadow, mirrored his every turn. He slammed the accelerator, pushing his old sedan to its limits, tires squealing in protest as he swerved onto a narrow, unpaved road. Dust billowed behind him, a desperate smoke screen, but the headlights of his pursuer cut through it relentlessly. This wasn't a random encounter. This was orchestrated. He was prey. He remembered the rules. The game. The escalating stakes. He had to assume they knew everything about him, every escape route, every weakness. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but a cold, hard resolve began to set in. He wouldn't go down without a fight. He wouldn't let them win. The road grew rougher, potholes jarring his car, threatening to rip the suspension apart. He glanced in his rearview mirror. The SUV was gaining. Its powerful engine hummed a menacing tune that vibrated through the very ground. Michael gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He needed a plan, something more than blind flight. He scanned the sparse landscape, overgrown fields, skeletal trees, the occasional dilapidated barn. He was miles from any town, any help. Then a faint memory, a detail from his childhood growing up in a similar rural area, sparked in his mind. An old logging trail, barely visible, veering off to the right, hidden by a thicket of thorny bushes. It was a gamble. The trail was probably impassable for most vehicles, but his smaller, lighter sedan might just make it. And if it was a dead end, he was truly trapped. Without hesitation, he jerked the wheel, sending the car lurching violently into the thicket. Branches scraped against the paint, sounding like claws tearing at metal. The car bucked and groaned, but he pushed through, the path barely wide enough. He could hear the SUV hesitate, its powerful engine roaring as it tried to follow, but the thick brush and the narrowness of the opening seemed to momentarily impede it. He drove deeper into the woods, the logging trail almost swallowed by undergrowth. The canopy overhead became so dense that the moonlight was all but extinguished, plunging him into a terrifying darkness. He relied on his headlights, which cut through the gloom like desperate beacons. The SUV's lights disappeared behind him. Had he lost them? A sliver of hope, fragile as glass, began to form. But then, a new light pierced the darkness ahead. Not the familiar beam of car headlights, but a powerful spotlight, sweeping through the trees. And another, coming from different directions. They weren't just following him on the road. They had anticipated his move. They had cut off his escape. Michael slammed on the brakes, his car skidding to a halt. He was in a clearing now, a small forgotten patch of land where loggers might have once turned their trucks. And surrounding it on all sides were at least 3, perhaps 4 identical black SUVs, their spotlights converging on his car, pinning him in a blinding, inescapable glare. The doors of the SUVs opened in unison, and figures emerged. They were tall, powerfully built, dressed in dark tactical gear, their faces obscured by balaclavas. They moved with a chilling efficiency, a practiced coordination that spoke of military training. No words were exchanged. No threats were shouted. Just the silent, intimidating advance. Michael fumbled for his phone, but it was useless. No signal. He was completely cut off. He was in their arena now. He looked around wildly, searching for any possible escape, but the ring of SUVs was complete. He was caught. One of the figures, slightly taller than the others, stopped a few feet from his driver's side door. He didn't speak, just raised a hand. The other figures froze. Michael could feel their eyes on him. Even through the balaclavas, a collective, cold scrutiny. Then a voice, calm and electronically distorted, emanated from a speaker on the lead figure's chest. "Michael, the game is not over. It has merely entered its next phase." Michael's blood ran cold. The distortion made the voice genderless, inhuman. It was the same voice from the initial messages, the one that had orchestrated everything. "What do you want?" Michael croaked, his voice raw with fear and exhaustion. "We want to observe, Michael. To understand. To push the boundaries of human resilience. And fear." The voice paused, a chilling silence hanging in the air. "You've performed admirably. Your flight response, your resourcefulness. It's all been most illuminating." "Illuminating?" Michael scoffed, a desperate laugh escaping him. "You've terrorized me. Hunted me like an animal. For what? A twisted experiment." "Precisely," the voice replied, devoid of emotion. "And you, Michael, are a prime subject. Your unique blend of intellect and raw survival instinct makes you invaluable. We've learned so much from your journey through the urban labyrinth. Your descent into the wilderness, your encounters." Encounters? Michael's mind raced. The accidents? The people who died? "You caused all of it." "We merely facilitated the conditions," the voice corrected. "The choices, the reactions, the consequences. Those were yours, Michael. The true beauty of the experiment lies in the unadulterated human response to extreme pressure. The desperation, the paranoia, the moral compromises. You've shown us remarkable things." A wave of nausea washed over Michael. He wasn't just being hunted. He had been a puppet, dancing on strings pulled by unseen hands. Every moment of terror, every loss, every desperate decision had been meticulously observed, analyzed, enjoyed. "You're sick," Michael whispered, tears of rage and helplessness stinging his eyes. "We are scientists, Michael," the voice responded, a hint of something that might have been amusement, or perhaps just cold satisfaction in its tone. "Pushing the boundaries of knowledge. And now we have a new variable. One that will truly test the limits of your fear." The lead figure took a step closer. "You may have noticed, Michael, that the stakes have escalated. The initial game was merely a preliminary assessment. A warm-up. We needed to ensure you were truly a worthy subject for the real experiment." "The real experiment?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "Indeed. The parameters are simple but profound. You will be placed in an environment designed to elicit the purest, most primal forms of fear. Every phobia, every deep-seated anxiety, every nightmare you've ever had. We're going to bring them to life. And we will observe." As the voice spoke, 2 of the figures moved to Michael's car. One opened the passenger door, the other the driver's. Michael instinctively tried to lock them, but the central locking system had already been disabled. He tried to start the car, but the engine merely coughed weakly, then died. They had tampered with it, of course. They were always ahead. A figure reached in, unbuckling his seatbelt with practiced ease. Michael thrashed, kicking out, but a powerful hand grabbed his arm, pulling him from the car with surprising force. He struggled, but their grip was like iron. He was no match for their combined strength. They dragged him towards one of the SUVs, not the one that had been following him, but a different one, its rear doors open, revealing a dark, padded interior. He fought, clawed, screamed, but it was useless. His cries were swallowed by the vast, silent woods. Just before they shoved him inside, the lead figure leaned in close, its balaclava-clad face inches from his own. The distorted voice, now directly in his ear, sent shivers down his spine. "Welcome, Michael, to the final stage. The true experiment in human fear. Let's see how long you can hold on to your sanity." He was thrown into the back of the SUV. The doors slammed shut, plunging him into absolute darkness. He could feel the soft, thick padding all around him, muffling any sound, any light. He was completely disoriented, unable to tell which way was up, or where they were going. The vehicle started to move, the low hum of its engine the only sound in his suffocating prison. He was utterly, completely alone, in the hands of monsters who saw him not as a human being, but as a specimen. The darkness pressed in, mirroring the terror that was now consuming his very soul. He had survived so much only to be delivered into something far, far worse. The game wasn't closing in anymore. It had swallowed him whole. The cold was the first thing to truly register, a biting clinical chill seeping into his bones through the thin fabric of his clothes. Darkness still clung to him, but it was no longer the oppressive, suffocating black of the labyrinth. This was a different kind of void, sterile, silent, almost expectant. Michael tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if encased in lead. A dull throb pulsed behind his eyes, a phantom echo of the terror he'd just endured. He was lying flat on his back, on a surface that felt smooth, unyielding, and utterly foreign. Then a faint hum began, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very air around him. It grew slowly, steadily, until a soft, diffused light bloomed above him. Not a harsh spotlight, but a gentle, almost ethereal glow, revealing a ceiling of polished, pristine white. The walls were the same, stretching away in every direction, seamless and unbroken. There were no doors, no windows, no visible seams or vents. It was a perfect, inescapable cube. A voice, calm and modulated, cut through the silence. It wasn't the disembodied, taunting voice of the game master. This voice was different, measured, clinical. It sounded like a recording, or perhaps a live feed from an observation room. Subject 734. It began, the words echoing slightly in the pristine space. Michael Vance. Age 32. Psychological profile. High resilience, strong problem-solving aptitude, pronounced empathy response. Initial baseline established. Michael tried to shout, to demand answers, but his throat felt raw, his voice a mere croak. He still couldn't move his body much, only a slight tremor in his fingers. He was paralyzed or perhaps heavily sedated. The parameters of Phase 1 have been successfully concluded, the voice continued, devoid of emotion. Subject 734 displayed expected patterns of fear, aggression, desperation, and ultimately adaptation. The game modules proved effective in isolating and amplifying specific cognitive and emotional responses. A cold wave washed over Michael. The game? Modules? It wasn't real? Or was it too real? His mind reeled, struggling to reconcile the horrors he'd faced with the detached, scientific jargon. The faces of Jessica, David, Emily, were they all just part of a simulation? Actors? Or worse, other subjects broken and repurposed? The objective Michael, the voice continued, now with a slightly more personal, yet still unsettling tone, was never about escape. It was about observation, about understanding the human mind at its breaking point, to isolate the purest form of fear, and to chart its journey through the human psyche. You, Michael, have been an exceptional specimen. Specimen. The word from his last conscious thought in the darkness. It resonated with a chilling finality. He wasn't a player. He was a rat in a maze, a test subject in a horrifying laboratory. We believe that fear, properly understood and manipulated, is the ultimate tool, the voice explained almost philosophically. It can control, it can motivate, it can break, and it can rebuild. Our work here at the Project Chimera Initiative is to harness that power, to understand the very fabric of human resilience and vulnerability. Project Chimera. The name sent a shiver down his spine. It sounded like something out of a nightmare, a clandestine organization operating outside the bounds of ethics and humanity. You have navigated our scenarios with remarkable tenacity, the voice praised, a hint of something almost like admiration, but still devoid of warmth. The simulated threats, the manufactured betrayals, the carefully orchestrated moments of hope and despair, each designed to push you further to extract more data. Your brain activity, your physiological responses, your decision-making under extreme duress, all meticulously recorded and analyzed. Michael felt a scream building in his chest, but it remained trapped. The sheer scale of the deception, the meticulous cruelty, was incomprehensible. Every waking moment of terror, every desperate decision, every fleeting glimmer of hope, all of it was a lie, a puppet show for unseen observers. Many subjects do not make it through phase 1 with their cognitive functions intact, the voice stated matter-of-factly. Their minds shatter, leaving them in a state of irreversible catatonia or perpetual psychosis. You, Michael, are different. You retained a remarkable degree of self-awareness, even in the most extreme circumstances. That makes you invaluable. Invaluable. The word, meant as a compliment, felt like a death sentence. If he was invaluable, it meant they weren't done with him. It meant this sterile cube, this chilling voice, was just the beginning. We are now entering phase 2, the voice announced, and the diffused light above him intensified slightly, making the pristine white walls seem to press in even closer. Phase 2 is about integration, about understanding how a mind, having endured such profound trauma, can be recalibrated, how reality can be reconstructed. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. Recalibrated? Reconstructed? What did that even mean? Were they going to erase his memories? Plant new ones? Turn him into something else? You see, Michael, the voice continued, as if sensing his unspoken questions, the world outside is far more chaotic and unpredictable than our carefully controlled environments. But what if it didn't have to be? What if human behavior on a grand scale could be influenced, guided, even controlled by understanding the levers of fear? Imagine a society free from the unpredictable variables of human emotion, governed by calculated responses to perceived threats. This wasn't just an experiment in human fear, it was an experiment in human control. They weren't just observing, they were seeking to weaponize their findings. You have seen the depths of human despair, Michael. You have felt the absolute crushing weight of hopelessness, and you have survived it. That survival instinct, that raw primal drive, is what we seek to understand, to replicate, and ultimately to direct. A faint whirring sound began to emanate from the walls themselves, a low mechanical thrum that vibrated through the floor and up into Michael's body. He could feel a subtle pressure, a gentle hum against his skin. It was as if the room itself was coming alive, or perhaps preparing to do something to him. Consider this your new reality, Michael, the voice concluded, the clinical tone now laced with an unsettling sense of triumph. The outside world, with its messy freedoms and its inconvenient truths, is no longer relevant. You are now part of something far greater, a pioneer in the ultimate frontier, the human mind itself. Welcome, Michael, to the future of fear. As the voice faded, the gentle hum intensified, becoming a pervasive, almost hypnotic drone. The light above him began to pulse, slowly at first, then faster, casting rhythmic shadows that danced across the seamless white walls. Michael's vision blurred, his thoughts fragmenting into 1,000 terrified pieces. He tried to fight it, to cling to the memories of his past, the faces of his friends, the life he once knew. But the hum was too strong, the pulsing light too mesmerizing. He felt a sensation, not of pain but of profound, invasive alteration. It was as if tendrils of pure energy were reaching into his brain, probing, mapping, and subtly, irrevocably rewriting him. His memories flickered, warped, and shifted, like old film reels catching fire. The horrors of the labyrinth began to blend with the pristine white of the room, the faces of his tormentors merging with the calm, clinical voice. He was losing himself, not just his sanity but his very identity. The Michael Vance who had entered the game, who had fought and screamed and hoped, was dissolving. He was becoming data and input and output, a perfectly calibrated instrument in a grand, terrifying symphony of control. The last flicker of his conscious thought was a single agonizing realization. The game hadn't just swallowed him, it had digested him, and now it was ready to reshape what was left. The experiment in human fear wasn't just a test, it was a transformation, and Michael was its masterpiece. The white walls pulsed, the hum deepened, and in the depths of his being, Michael Vance ceased to exist as he once was, becoming merely a vessel for the future of fear. The experiment had truly just begun.